Hey, what's up guys? I'm finally back to take a look at Resident Evil Village on M1 and M2 iPads. Enjoy! Alrighty, once again, it's worth looking at the supported devices for this game, and here they are. Now I want to have a look at the tech involved with RE Village on iPad. So it's a Metal 3 game, and as I said in my previous video, it might be Metal 3.1 for iPadOS 17, as iPadOS 17 supports Metal 3.1, same as iOS 17. The game supports Metal effects upscaling on iPad. You have quality mode and performance mode. In my humble opinion, I think the game uses temporal upscaling for quality and spatial upscaling for performance. This is one of the first games to support HDR on iPad. Due to technical reasons, I can't show HDR footage in this video, but trust me, it really adds to the immersion. The game has iCloud backup, which means you have the ability to upload and download saved data via iCloud Drive on iPad and iPhone. Your local saves are stored under the Files app on iPhone and iPad. Unfortunately, saved data cannot be uploaded and downloaded between macOS and iPhone and iPad. It's not a universal app with the Mac App Store version. This is very anti-consumer, and I don't know why Capcom have done this. On iPad, same as iPhone, the game has fully customizable graphical options, which is also the same as Windows, PC, and Mac. Just like on the iPhone 15 Pro and Mac, there is no ray tracing support on iPad. This is most likely because M1 and M2 iPads don't support hardware ray tracing, so maybe it will come to the next generation of iPads. The game is also missing VSync. However, based on my testing, it looks like VSync is enabled in the background by default. It's just weird that the user can't have access to enabling or disabling it. One of my biggest issues with this game on iPad is that it doesn't take up the full screen real estate of iPad displays. Instead, it kind of plays at resolutions that are a 16:9 aspect ratio, so there are black bars at the top and bottom of the display. So you can see little icons at the top of the display for battery percentage, Wi-Fi, and so forth. It's very distracting and a bit ugly, if I'm honest. I really just wished that Capcom optimized this game to take full advantage of the iPad displays, or maybe they did this for a performance reason. I don't know. And game file size with all content installed is 6.3 GB on iPad compared to 34.49 on Mac. As I said in my previous video, it probably uses iOS texture compression algorithms, ASTC, to remove unused stuff on iPadOS and iOS. Moving on, let's have a look at the controls for this game. First, touch controls. Just like an iPhone, the game uses an on-screen controller layout for gameplay. It's so bad, it's even harder to play the game on iPad than iPhone because of the larger display and your hands and your fingers trying to reach everywhere for the awkward buttons. It's so bad. It just seems like Apple and Capcom don't want you to even touch the touch controls and want you to play with the controller. And once again, the on-screen controller UI gets in the way of menu interaction. You can customize the controller layout, but it's still not really going to help that much. Thankfully, the game does have full controller support, and it has rumble vibration. Also, on iPad, just like on iPhone, for some reason it thinks every controller is an Xbox controller. I'm just a little bit disappointed though that there is no DualSense support for triggers and haptic feedback like the PS5 version. This is the same case as the iPhone and Mac version. I also had noticed this strange bug where my PS5 controller sometimes became unresponsive, and whatever the last button I pressed, this is continuously pressed in-game, if that's what you want to say, without my control. For example, Ethan might walk forwards or keep shooting, and I can't stop it. Anyway, if you're playing an iPad, I strongly suggest getting a case with a stand so you can sit back and relax on like a couch and play it that way. Unfortunately though, and this is really, really sad, is that the game has no mouse and keyboard support on iPad. Why? It's such a shame, as iPads have had support for keyboard and mouse for years now. There are many games with this support. And I know for a fact that there are many people out there that won't buy this game on iPad without this peripheral support. So please add it to the game. You can also play this game on an external display, but I don't really suggest it. You can connect your iPad to a monitor and play it with a controller for maybe a more console experience, but it's worth noting that it's just mirroring your iPad display. So you're playing this game at a 4:3 aspect ratio with black bars on the sides and the top. It's not a good gaming experience. While M1 and M2 iPads support full screen for external displays, RE Village doesn't enter full screen when connected to an external display on iPad. In fact, I don't know of any game that has this support. A little bit unfortunate. Now it's time to look at the performance of this game on iPad. Up first is my M1 iPad Air, which has 8GB of RAM. Before we get fully into this, I just want to make a quick note that I am unable to track frame rates above 60 FPS due to technical reasons. With that in mind, let's get to it. First, let's see how the game plays at default settings, which is 1600 by 1112, and a mix of medium and low graphics, and metal effects is set to quality. Or you can see the settings on screen right now. The game plays okay in this state, with about 40 to 60 FPS in some cases, which in my opinion is actually pretty good, as when you think about it, this device doesn't have a proper cooling solution. It has no fan. Does the device get hot? Yes, but it's nowhere near as bad as iPhone, and I did not notice any major thermal throttling issues when playing in this mode. The temperature only went up to about 35 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 98% to 87% within about 30 minutes. For most people who play this game, I think default settings will be okay on this machine. I then tried the game at 1920 by 1334 and high graphics with metal effects on quality. You can see the settings on screen right now. The game actually was pretty playable, with about 30 to 40 FPS. Not an amazing frame rate, but playable. Playing at a higher resolution is a very good idea on iPad, as you must remember, Metal Effects is upscaling a lower resolution to a higher output resolution. When playing at these settings, the temperature only reached about 35 degrees for me, and the battery went from 96 to 86% within about 30 minutes. What if you want 60 FPS on the M1 iPad Air? It's possible, actually, and it's much more achievable than the iPhone 15 Pro, which basically cannot achieve 60 FPS, even at the lower settings. What you want to use is my on-screen settings right now. This is 1600 by 1112 with a mix of medium and low graphics. The FPS target is 60 and Metal Effects is switched to performance. Yes, Metal Effects provides a worse image quality, but this is the best performance I could get on M1 iPad Air for 60 FPS. It's worth noting though that it's not a locked 60 FPS. That's just not possible with decent settings enabled. It's the best I could do, folks. But it's still pretty impressive that this device without a fan is able to achieve this type of performance. I was also really surprised that the temperature of this device only went up to 35 degrees. I can't get this device to go above 35 degrees. And the battery went from, when I was playing it, at 81% to 73% within a 30-minute playtime. Another good idea is to play the game with a 30 FPS cap. This allows you to play with higher quality settings. You can see the on-screen settings for this now. This is 1600 by 1112 with a mix of high and medium settings, a 30 FPS cap, and metal effects is on quality. This provides a mostly locked 30 FPS with some small dips during challenging scenes.
I guess I gotta do this.
Capcom should have made this the default settings on M1 iPad Air, as it provides a balanced experience that most users will be happy with. The battery temperature reached 35 degrees again, and when I was playing at 84% battery, it only went down to 75% within 30 minutes. I also wanted to try the game at max graphics quality, which is 2360 by 1640 and everything at max graphics. It's unplayable, but unlike the iPhone 15 Pro, the device, for me anyway, did not crash. Which was interesting because the device was telling me that I was using well over 8GB of RAM. In fact, about 12GB. And this device only has 8GB of RAM. So not crashing, in my opinion, was actually pretty cool. It's still unplayable, but I just wanted to see what would happen. Our next device to look at is my M1 iPad Pro, which has 16GB of RAM. First, let's see how the game plays at default graphics, which is 1600 by 1118 with a mix of medium and low graphics, and metal effects is on quality. It's basically the same settings as the M1 iPad Air. The results are pretty similar, with about 40 to 60 FPS. The device did get to 60 FPS a few more times than my M1 iPad Air. I'm not sure if this is because of the increased amount of RAM or so forth, but the devices share the same chip, so I'm not sure. As I said before, default settings is most likely ideal for the majority of you watching. When playing in this state, my iPad Pro reached a battery temperature of 39 degrees, a bit hotter than my M1 iPad Air, but it's worth noting that my M1 iPad Air is only a few days old. I bought it just for this video, so that could be a contributing factor. And it also went from 100% battery to 90% within 30 minutes. Next, let's see how the game plays at high graphics with 1920 by 1342 and metal effects and quality. Or you can see the settings I used on screen now. Again, very similar to M1 iPad Air, with about 30 to 40 FPS, which again I think is still really impressive. It's worth noting though that this device did thermal throttle a little worse than my M1 iPad Air in this state, sometimes going down into the low 30s. And I think this just could be because the device is quite a bit older than my M1 iPad Air and has been used a lot. So yeah. In this state, temperature reached 41 degrees and the battery percentage went down from 89 to 79% within 30 minutes. So what if you want 60 FPS on M1 iPad Pro? It's just like M1 iPad Air. You can see these settings on screen now. It's 1600 by 1118 with a mix of medium and low graphics, a 60 FPS cap, and Metal Effects is on performance. It's worth noting though that this is not going to provide a locked 60 FPS. This is the best results I could get after, 3 hours of testing on this device to get a decent frame rate. Going any lower than this, the game just looks pretty ugly on iPad. In this state, the temperature reached 45 degrees, so it does get quite hot. And the battery percentage went from 100% down to 87% within 30 minutes. A good idea is to play the game with a 30 FPS cap at higher quality settings. You can see these on-screen settings now. This is 1920 by 1342 with a mix of high and medium graphics, a 30 FPS cap, and Metal Effects is on quality. This is a really good idea as it reduces thermal throttling and provides a more consistent experience longer into the game. In this state, the temperature reached 40 degrees and the battery went from 90% to 81%. I also wanted to see how this device went at max graphics, which is 2388 by 1668 and everything on their max settings. Just like M1 iPad Air, it's unplayable, but it does reach 30 FPS a little bit more frequently than the M1 iPad Air, which was interesting to me. I think a reason for this is because this device has 16 GB of RAM. In this state, the device is only using 12 GB of RAM, but I'm not saying it's playable because it's not. It's just, I wanted to have a look and see how it went, and this is how it went. Our last device to look at is my 12.9-inch iPad Pro with M2. This device has 16 GB of memory. First, let's see how the game plays at default graphics, which is 1600 by 1200, with a mix of low and medium graphics, and Metal Effects is on quality. Or you can see the settings on screen now. It does quite a bit better than the M1 iPads, as it reaches 60 FPS more frequently. The temperature went up to 42 degrees, and the battery went from 100% to 87% within 30 minutes. You can obviously go well above these settings on M2 iPads though. For example, here is high graphics at 1920 by 1440 with Metal Effects and quality. Or you can see the exact settings I used on screen now. I was very surprised to see that the device generally gets 50 to 60 FPS in this state. I would say that a lot of you could actually play the game like this, because playing at this high resolution is an absolute treat, as Metal Effects doesn't have as much of an effect on the image quality. There will be some occasions where the frame rate can go down to the low 30s, but it's not as frequent as the M1 models. However, the temperature of the device can reach about 45 degrees, and the battery percentage, for me, when I was playing at 90%, went down to 75%. So keep that in mind. Playing these settings uses a bit more resources on your iPad. Here is the game playing at 1920 by 1440, medium graphics with a 60 FPS target, and Metal Effects is on performance. Or you can see the exact settings I used on screen now. Metal Effects performance is a mixed bag for me, because it provides pretty bad image quality, and it's very noticeable on these iPads. Keep in mind though, that the temperature can reach 45 degrees in this state, and the battery can use about For me, I played at 100% battery and it went down to 85% battery. Another fantastic option is to play the game at high graphics and then 1920 by 1440. Or you can see the exact settings on screen now. You need to use a 30 FPS cap to achieve this type of performance. For me, it was a locked 30 FPS. Wonderful. I know I say this all the time, but 30 FPS is very playable for this game, as it's quite a slow-paced shooter. It's also worth noting that Metal Effects is off for these settings and provides the absolute best picture quality that I could provide with a 30 FPS target. Entirely up to you. I just think this is probably the best way to play the game on M2 iPad Pro, and I think Capcom should have made this the default settings for the game here, because the game just looks absolutely gorgeous. The temperature of the device also only went up to 40 degrees, so quite a bit lower, and the battery percentage when I was playing 100% went down to 92% within a 30-minute playtime. I also wanted to see how the game played at max graphics and max resolution, with about 20 to 30 FPS. I still wouldn't suggest playing the game this way because the lower frame rate is definitely noticeable. Alrighty, so that was Resident Evil Village on the M1 and M2 iPads. Impressed? Yeah, I'm impressed with this. It's significantly better than the iPhone 15 Pro. And that is to be expected. These devices are very, very powerful and capable in terms of gaming. They're not amazing, but they can do a lot more than people expect. I'm hoping with the release of Resident Evil Village and a few other upcoming big games that Apple recently announced, we can see some more flagship titles come to this platform. Because I really want this platform to succeed, because I love gaming on my iPad. And that's basically it. I'm pretty tired now, so I'm gonna go to sleep.